Let's start doing a multivariate summary. Multivariate just means that we're going to have more than one predictor variable. So we've got our two predictor variables and our outcome. So we're going to be asking about mortality by rank and duty. So we might ask the driving question of, are there differences in mortality rates between duty and rank? So who was more likely to die? Privates in the infantry, privates not in the infantry, higher rank in the infantry, higher rank not in the infantry. As you can see at the moment, we've got raw data that shows that those are very different raw numbers. But we can't directly compare those because they are coming from different base rates. So, for example, the 6 that died of the higher ranked non-infantry look like nothing compared to the 67 who died of the private non-infantry. But we can't compare those raw data, those raw numbers directly. We need to take into account their base rates. And when we look at it, 67 of 1,000, nearly 1,200, and 6 of 100, those are actually going to be almost the same rate of, or mortality rate. 6 out of 100 and 67 out of over 1,000. So let's go ahead and then calculate those percentages. We're going to need another contingency table. It's going to have the same headers as these. Here, let me just get our pie chart out of the way. Just going to move that over there. I'm going to move our nice table over there. Okay, so we're going to create another summary contingency table. We want the same headers. So I'm just going to copy that and come down a few rows and paste it. So let's clear out the raw data here. I've got it selected. I'm going to right click and choose clear contents. Do you see that the formulas for the totals are all now referencing the same, the relative cells? So when we copied, that formula was copied as take the cell above me and add it to the cell 2 above me. And so those are still going to be good. Those are still going to make sense. So what in these cells, the data that we want to calculate into here are the mortality rate for each of those 4 groups. So we're going to start with just the raw numbers. The data that we want to put into these cells, into this contingency table, are the raw numbers of how many privates in the infantry died from any cause. So we're going to take these 4 data set points and lay them out in that contingency table. So again, this is privates in the infantry. This is privates assigned to other duty. This is not privates assigned to the infantry, and not privates assigned to other duty. Just take a minute and double check that your totals, just prove to yourself that your totals are doing what they should be doing. So we can now look at this and ask how many privates in all died, how many higher rank soldiers in all died, how many from the infantry died, how many soldiers not in the infantry died. So it's giving us those by rearranging those raw numbers into a 2 by 2 contingency table, we're able to collapse across the levels of one variable and sum across the levels of one variable. We're able to say, let's just sum up all of the privates, ignoring the variable infantry and non-infantry. And so that's called collapsing the data across the levels of the other variable. That's what we've got here in our total row and column. We've still got the base rate problem where this 6 and this 67 look really different because we haven't got them relative to their base rates. So we're going to need to do a percentage. It's going to be very like the percentage table that we did for just the total number of soldiers in those groups. So we need to borrow our headers again. Let's just do that. We want of those privates in the infantry, what proportion died. So we're actually going to look at this table kind of superimposed over this table. Here's the total. Let's write that. And here's the died from any cause. So we're going to take those two tables and sort of superimpose them and say, what's the proportion of this number to this number? What's the proportion of this number to this number for those 4 pieces of information? So right here, we want to know the percentage of privates in the infantry who died from any cause. So that's going to be those who died divided by the base rate of privates in the infantry. Go ahead and fill in the other 3 cells. Those who died infantry higher rank divided by higher rank. Can we use fill? I think we should be able to. I've highlighted both of those cells. Let's fill across. We can check our formula. Yep, that looks good. Yep, that looks good. It's added those, it's presented those as decimals. We want them as percent, and we like to add 2 decimal places because that's what APA style calls for. So now we're asking the question, of all of the privates in the infantry, what percent died? So how dangerous was it to be in these different ranks and duties? So this is percent deaths, any cause. Let's add the totals. So we want to know, again, just the proportion, the total who died over the total in that group. I'm typing an enter to go down, a tab to go across. And again, we're going to want to look at those as percentages. So we've got each individual group, and then we've calculated the totals. Now, when we calculated the totals, we went back to the raw data. We didn't just add the total, the infantry to the across the levels of the infantry. So we wanted to know what percent of 3003 is 374. We don't add those percentages together in order to get that number. We need to go back to the raw numbers. I think this data would be very interesting to present as a column chart. I'm going to highlight the infantry, the non-infantry, the private, the higher rank, and those percentages. And I'm going to come up to my insert ribbon. Let's see if it's recommending it. Yep, it certainly is. So I'm going to insert a column chart. That's good. It's got 0 as a baseline. A column chart should always have 0 as a baseline. These are categorical variables, and that the way that we display that is by ensuring that there is space between the columns, that they aren't touching. If we make them touching, the implication is that they are along a continuum, that they are continuous. The width of the bar should be about twice the space between it. It looks like we've got maybe a little bit of an issue with the proportion and the space there. We have 2 predictor variables. So one of the predictor variables has been laid out along the x-axis, private versus higher rank. So that predictor variable would be their rank. The other predictor variable has been laid out in the legend, and they've still got the legend down at the bottom. Let's just move the legend to the right. So infantry, non-infantry, their duty. We need to know how to decide. Do we put which predictor variable should we put on the bottom, on the x-axis? Which predictor variable should we put in the legend? In this case, it doesn't make much difference. If one of your predictor variables is a really fixed quality, like gender, for instance, then maybe that makes the most sense to have that along the x-axis and cluster the data by that, because you'd then be saying, within the males, this is the pattern, and within the females, this is the pattern. But neither of these are particularly fixed. One would imagine that you could move up in the ranks, or one would imagine that you might be assigned a different duty. So it's very much up to you. Do you want to say, within the rank of private, this is the comparison between the number of deaths in the infantry and the number of deaths in the non-infantry? And within the higher rank, this is the pattern of deaths for the infantry and the non-infantry. Or do you want to say so use that same data in a different sentence? Let me show you that. So we're going to make sure that our chart is highlighted, just selected. We're going to come up to the switch row column hot button. Now watch what happens. It's taken now the rank and put it over here in the legend, and it's taken the duty and put it down here along the x-axis. So now you would be saying, within those assigned to the infantry, here is the comparison of death mortality rate for the privates and mortality rate for the higher ranking officers or higher ranks. Within the non-infantry, here is the mortality rate for the privates and for the higher ranks. I think in this case, this layout makes a lot more sense, that you can now really see that within the infantry, it's very dangerous to be a private. But within the non-infantry, it's, you're equally at risk if you're a private or a higher rank. But it very much depends on the sentence that you're going to end up writing. And again, that's the switch row / column button on the chart design ribbon. We've got to do the color. That's better. Charts need titles, outcome variable, by, predictor variable, and predictor variable. So what's our outcome variable? Was it mortality rate, yeah, by rank and duty. So we've got three variables that we're going to need to label here. Let's add the chart element and look under the axis titles and choose the primary horizontal. So what variable have you got here? Infantry, non-infantry. That looks like the duty assignment. Be very careful once you've added a title. If you switch, it doesn't know that you need to change the title. So be very careful that if you switch your row column after you've added a title, that you be sure to edit that title. What do we think about the y-axis? First off, it needs a title. Do we need, well, is there any clutter here, I guess? Those decimal places are pretty cluttering on the y-axis here. It doesn't add much in any information to have the 0.00. So I'm going to click on that axis and I'm going to come over to my Format Axis dialog box. And I'm going to choose the chart options and the axis options. And down here under number, decimal places. That's what I'm looking for. I want to get rid of those decimal places. Okay, that's looking cleaner. We could maybe get rid of some of the lines, but I think that looks fine. You can make other design decisions, and when you're happy with how your graph looks, go ahead and copy it and paste it into your Word document and write a few sentences that describe the relative mortality rate by rank and duty.